This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
I ask the Prime Minister, if you are so confident about your view of fight back, why won't you call an early election?
Because, mate. Because.
Order.
The answer is, mate, because. The answer is, mate, because. The answer is, mate, because I want to do you slowly. Mate, I want to do you. I want to do you. Mate, I want to do you. I want to do you slowly.
Barnaby, I'll open the doors for you, come across One Nation. Barnaby is actually talking, he's more aligned with One Nation, what he is with the National Party. He's been shut down, the National Party. They've put him on the back bench, out of the way. Just sit there, shut up, Barnaby. You know, we don't want to hear from you.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Well, happy Sunday and welcome to Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. Produced, of course, by Michael the Great Griffin. I'm Emerald Moon. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. And this week, I am joined by, I'm a little bit starstruck to be joined by former public servant, Guardian columnist and Chief of Economics at the Australia Institute, Greg Jericho. Welcome.
Hi, Emerald. Great to be here.
It's Grog himself.
It is.
This
Grog
week
from the internet, yes.
That's right. Yeah, it's hashtag #OzPolGrog. This week we are checking in quickly on the extremely fragile so-called peace deal in Gaza, and then getting into Labor's latest capitulation with their superannuation tax changes. Before we get to that, though, some quick admin up top. We still have a handful of tickets left for our live show in November. It is Saturday, the 1st of November, 4 p.m. at Comedy Republic in Melbourne, featuring Wil Anderson. It will be our 200th episode and also my last weekly episode before I step back from those. So if you haven't got tickets yet, please grab one. The link will be in the show notes. It's also linked on our social media, and we would love to see you there. And quickly as well, because I will be hanging around. I'm not doing weekly shows anymore after that, but I will still be on the Patreon. We have a Patreon, which is what funds the show. It pays Mike's wages. It allows us to do this ad-free and independently, and we put out bonus episodes every couple of weeks. So thank you to our new Patreon subscribers, James Can and Josie Stables. We love your work. It's $3 a month if you want to join. Patreon.com/seriousdangerau. You can also sign up to a yearly model, which a few folks have been doing, saves you a few dollars a year, but would love to have you there.
It seems Canberra's public servants need to watch what they say. Changes to the Australian Public Service Code of Conduct mean they can be sanctioned for any comments online deemed to be inappropriate. Does common sense dictate what you can and can't say? Or is Big Brother meddling in private lives?
Saying nothing at all, certainly the safest bet, but
yeah,
not a lot of fun.
I think, but I just don't think that's realistic. And so what happens is they just all adopt pseudonyms, they lock their Twitter accounts, and they keep saying what they were saying. They just hide the fact that they're public servants.
Greg Jericho has made a career of saying what he thinks, even when his online opinions were in opposition to those of the government of the day.
All right, admin out of the way. I can properly turn my attention to our guest. So I said that I say starstruck because I feel like I have this distinct memory actually of coming across you, Greg, in one of my uni lectures. You were used as like a little case study. Has anyone ever told you this before, that you're used as a case study? I don't know if it was either like media law or politics 101, but it was talking about code of conduct for public servants and the fact that you were tusk blogging about the government when you were still a public servant.
Yeah, I ruined it for everyone else. And just for viewers and listeners, if you can hear someone in the background, that is my daughter watching Bluey in the next room. So she's very
Perfect
excited. So
background.
apologies for that. Yeah, I was blogging. This was way back in 2007, 2008. I started blogging when I was working at the Department of Communications. So this is way back under Howard. And I pretty much, at the time, there really wasn't a lot of rules or anything around the internet by public servants. There was no real social media. Facebook was barely a thing. Not even sure if it was a thing then. There's sure as heck was no Twitter.
Yeah, very new anyway.
And yeah, there was some blogging. And so I had a couple mates who were also public servants who were lawyers. So I actually sort of chatted with them and said, do you think I can do this blog?
Oh, really? You checked first?
Yeah, I definitely checked because I was, I've been a public servant for all of 2 years or something. And I thought, well, this is my life. I didn't want to screw it up. I had a mortgage and 2 young kids.
Fair.
So I didn't want to lose my job. And the best we could work out was so long as I didn't write about anything that was related to my work, I was fine. And so that's what I did. Didn't really have a big audience at the start, then sort of started getting picked up, got picked up a lot more once Twitter came along and I joined that and it sort of grew and grew. And and then 2010 election, I decided to do basically a day's play. So I did a daily post during the 2010 election. By this stage, I was probably, I was getting 2,000 or so regular readers a day, which it wasn't too bad, to be honest.
Bad. Yeah.
Didn't have a name, wasn't anybody. They were just reading it because they liked my stuff. And also because this was really still in the nascent days of Twitter, where you could chat to journalists, Laurie Oakes, Lee Sales back then, all of these journalists, they kind of chatted. It wasn't as vicious as it is now, and they were also, the press gallery was very much in the sense of we need to defend our turf. We need to respond to our critics in a way that they don't bother right now. So, and because I was a public servant, I think most people knew I was a public servant. It wasn't that big of a shock. But because I was a public servant, I knew I couldn't abuse these guys on social media because it was no different than getting into an abusive fight outside a pub on a Friday night. They could still land you in trouble with the code of conduct and the public servant. So while everyone else was abusing them online and swearing at them, I was always polite. And because I was the main sort of focus through my blogs, all the journalists were kind of always responding to me because they knew I wouldn't swear at them and everything. And so I was getting a fairly big following and a lot of journalists were following me. And then I think it was day 13 of the 2010 election. I just had enough of the coverage. It was terribly crap. And so I basically told them all they should all come home. They were wasting everyone's time, including their editors. And that kind of got picked up, got a lot of traction. It was the people who I was criticizing were reading it. And of course, they were upset. And kind of it was a bit of a moment, and it did change some of their coverage because they didn't like being criticized. And then it sort of died down. Then after the election, it came out that the head of the ABC at the time, on the Monday, because I wrote on a Friday night, on the Monday morning, called in his news directors and said, does this guy have a point and should we be changing how we're doing the coverage? And they did change how they were doing the coverage. He decided to say this in a speech, and suddenly everyone wanted to know who I was, especially the Australian who hated me because I'd very much criticized their coverage. And I was still just grog's gamut, basically because I was like, I'm a public servant. I don't want anyone to think this is my official public servant's views or anything. I really wanted to keep them separate. And but unless James Massola did not
friend of the pod
bring that kind of view.
He's yes, we James Massola is not a big fan of ours either. So we have a mutual friend there that in that he outed you. I think he also, I mean, journalists are they're sensitive creatures, aren't they?
Extremely sensitive, and I say this as an official paid up member of the
But you're
Canberra Press
you're on their
Gallery.
side now, yeah.
Yeah, they're extremely thin-skinned, especially, and look, to an extent, I can understand it because is a fair bit of vitriol out there, but
Hmm.
they're just as whenever anyone is criticised, especially of any note, they circle the wagons pretty quickly and defend themselves. And so, if you take on a big name like Sarah Ferguson or Lee Sales or someone like that, you very much will find that you are taking on everybody.
Target. Mm.
Yeah. So whereas I didn't care about that, so I just went in and basically because I always, coming from an academic background, always had fairly good research and evidence for my criticism. So
Yes, I think that's what you're known for. You have the facts. Yeah. Funny that maybe you were kind of you were a trailblazer in getting doxxed. These are the days when doxing wasn't a thing, but you got
yeah, I wonder if
doxxed,
it'd be
one of the
legal now.
first.
I mean, the weird
Yeah.
thing was James Massola had actually used me as a source for a story just after the election because we'd actually conversed on Twitter. We'd, shared messages, just chatted about stuff. And he knew he'd actually interviewed me about the blog. And I said, look, I want to stay a pseudonym. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, that's fine. So he actually did a story about me. And then it even asked afterwards, after the election, what was happening in the public service. And I didn't really give him anything because I didn't know anything. I was pretty lowly in the public service. I just said, we've been through this before. We know how to change governments and change departments. And then, a couple of weeks later, he kind of blew his own source, really, which is an interesting way of doing.
Real no-no in journalism. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Look, as I say, you make choices in life. Sometimes you do them because you want to climb a ladder. And that's what your bosses want you to do. And you think it's in your best interests. And sometimes other people say they won't do that. And he made his choice. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
But and you were, as I said, back when I did it, there was nothing. And then I had the misfortune of being the first, which meant suddenly all the legislation or the regulations were being changed by the Public Service Commission. The ABC, I think it was, labelled the changes the Jericho rules or something, which I thought that's really lovely. All my mates in the public service were
What you
like,
always dreamed of when you were a little boy is
yeah,
having
well, they
reform
will lock
to the
their
public service
accounts
code.
and suddenly
Yeah.
started really worrying about getting, all their tweets used against them, which some of them were. So, I think I became somewhat a cautionary tale, but also he stuffed it up for everyone else because you couldn't
but
do what I
yes.
do now. You'd definitely be sacked.
Yeah, a cautionary tale perhaps, but also if it helps, I think the way you were presented in this lecture that I remember was as a little bit of a hero as well. Like, so it's not all bad.
Yeah, look, I think it goes back to it wasn't like I was just shouting. I was kind of doing it knowing I got to do this responsibly. And also it was always about, I didn't like the media that I was seeing. And so I thought, well, let's see if I can do it a bit better. And that's pretty much all it was. And, I never abused any, they went through everything I wrote. Believe me, they went through everything. And about the worst they could find was I called Greg Hunt the most hypocritical minister in government or something like that. Or, it was, there was nothing really abusive because I'm always there going, someone's going to find this out sooner or later. And I don't want to lose my job and my career. And, even though I didn't lose my career, some people do think I was sacked. I wasn't sacked. it wasn't a career improving move to be outed. I'll just say that my prospects
That's one way of putting
it. Becoming a deputy secretary or something. We're kind
if
of
you
killed.
wanted to stay in the public service for the rest of your life, probably not. But maybe it's for the best. Here you are now. You've been doing this.
Yeah.
You've been writing for The Guardian for how long?
Since day one, literally day one. When it started 2013, I think it was end of May, early June.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually on board beforehand because, it was in May because Guardian started a couple of weeks after the budget that year. And so Catherine Murphy and Lenore Taylor, who were the only two members of the Guardian Australia Canberra staff, apart from myself, and I was sort of freelance or just contract. We had nothing to do, so they rang up and said, "Do you want to come into the budget? We'll just kind of go through the motions." And so we were sitting in the budget with nothing to do except, this is what we'd be doing and this is what we'd be saying. And so I've been literally with Guardian not just since day one, but even beforehand. So now that Catherine Murphy hasn't been there, I mean, Lenore's the editor, but there's a couple others around in Sydney who have been there since the start, but I'm definitely one of the longest. I'm definitely tied for the longest, shall we say.
First up, is President Trump the only leader who could have got Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to this?
I think that's probably true. We always knew over this last year in all of the discussions internationally that we needed US engagement. There are other parts to building the pathway to peace, including the unprecedented commitments of the Arab League, recognition and so forth. But President Trump has got this over the line. It is an extraordinary achievement and one that people around the world are supportive of, and it will bring, we hope, where there has been despair for the people of Gaza, and I hope long-term peace for the people of Palestine and of Israel.
In relation to the United States and its approach to this, Donald Trump, there's some talk of him getting the Nobel Peace Prize. Would you support that? Do you think that would be a good move?
Well, certainly this peace plan is historically unprecedented, and this has been the biggest contribution to peace that we have seen in a very long time.
So you wouldn't be opposed to that idea?
Obviously, it's a matter for the committee, but this has been the greatest contribution to peace in the Middle East for a generation or more.
And so, I mean, obviously you're known mostly for your economics takes, your economic analysis, but I also can see that you're wearing a Readers and Writers Against Genocide shirt. I thought it would be remiss of us to do this podcast, and I want to talk about the super changes, but without kind of mentioning what is happening in Gaza. Not that we can possibly hope to summarize exactly what's going on, and we're recording this, I should say, actually even earlier than usual, Thursday night. So by the time you are hearing this, listener, many things may have changed. But I wanted to talk about, I guess, the state of play at the moment. We've had Hamas and Israel have both released captives, but the next stages of this so-called peace plan, this deal brokered by Donald Trump, seem so unclear that it's a little bit bizarre the way that political leaders, including in Australia, have been celebrating it. Is that a sense that you have as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of mission accomplished flags being flown all around the world, and anyone who just has a cursory insight into the issue knows we are a long way from that. Yes, the bombing has stopped. I wouldn't say the killing has stopped, because there certainly are reports still of Gazans being shot and murdered by the IDF fairly indiscriminately. We are seeing in some ways, the full picture of how the Palestinians were being treated by the Israelis while they were being, they themselves were essentially hostages. It's always kind of annoying that it's the
language
and the Palestinians are prisoners, like they actually did something wrong. obviously there might be some who are there legitimately, but there's a hell of a lot who are not. And have been and whatever they did, no one should be tortured the way we've seen some reports of these. So yeah, definitely not mission accomplished. And basically all that's happened is we've stopped the bombing and the complete daily war crimes and genocide and mass murder. But we're no different, and I wouldn't even say we're in a better place than we were, in September 2023, before this all kicked off. The tensions are still there. It's still a colonized area. Gazans have no rights. They don't have freedom of entry or exit or anything. And it's worse because now their livelihoods have been destroyed. And it's great for Donald Trump to be able to say he brought about peace and he can feel really good about himself. But the problem is with such a problem and a dilemma of Gaza and the West Bank and Israel is that it's a long-term thing, and Donald Trump hates long-term things. He likes the instant fix. To be able to say, oh, the deal's been made, dust my hands, and goes off and declares victory. And everyone's like, but it's not over. Whether he's talking trade, whether he's talking, a factory opened and he's like, yeah, I brought the factories back. And everyone's like, you realize that was already planned to be there. You didn't do anything. But that's fine with spin like that. But with this, if he says, yeah, I've done my stuff, off you go, then it's all gonna go to hell. So my optimistic take is that everyone around the world, all the leaders, kind of realize this, and also realize the one thing Trump loves more than an instant fix is a constant fix. And so they are really playing up his role to make him have some ownership of this. So that, but the problem is we're still talking Donald Trump here, not a guy well known for his humanitarianism or his care of people, who are suffering. And so if that's the best situation we're at, where we're hoping Donald Trump keeps the pressure on Netanyahu or something, you think, geez, we're still in a pretty shitty state of things.
Yeah. I mean, so that's an interesting take because we've obviously had, Penny Wong, Richard Marles, even Albanese to an extent, really patting Trump on the back. Penny Wong is, talking about how he's the only world leader. She said in this interview on Sky News, he's the only world leader who could have achieved this ceasefire. It's the quote, biggest contribution to peace in the Middle East for a generation or more. Do you think that is because that this is a kind of strategic move to put pressure on him to continue to intervene?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. And also, I mean, I always hate that kind of an argument that he's the only one who could have done it. It's very much the, only Nixon could have gone to China bullshit. Because what it actually is saying without actually saying it out loud is that if anyone else had done it, Donald Trump and all the Republicans and the MAGA would have criticized it like mad, said it was giving into terrorism, and done everything they could to undermine it. It's not that Joe Biden couldn't have done this. Joe Biden essentially had a very similar peace deal, or at least a ceasefire deal on the table, when the reports are that Netanyahu and Trump basically together decided that ain't going to happen because we don't want to give Biden a fillip before, or, we don't want to give the Democrats a fillip before the election. And if anyone else had come up with this, Trump would have been criticizing it all the way. And so what they're really saying is that when Trump's the only one who could have done it, it's that because the Democrats are not going, aside from them being completely useless, they're not going to, destroy a ceasefire deal just for vanity's sake. They're not going to take the issue as a political means to try and undermine them on a domestic level. And So, yeah, Donald Trump might have been the only one to get Netanyahu to stop, but he basically got Netanyahu to stop after such an incredible and a horrific amount of genocide had occurred that actually it was getting to the point where even nations like Australia and Canada were pushing back, and recognizing Palestine as a state is, and I know we were, second last to the table, and, there's so many more nations that have done it before us. But the fact that we, Canada and the UK did it, and the fact that all of those three nations, and I put Australia here as well, did it after internal pressure from the public. We had massive marches across Sydney Harbour Bridge. There was undeniable public pressure for the government to do something here in Australia. Certainly in the UK, there's massive pressure that they were feeling. And it was a case of Israel was getting to the point, and even America, Trump was realizing that we're on our own here, and do something makes me look great. And Netanyahu realizing he's running out of friends, and if he keeps going, it's going to get even worse. FIFA and UEFA were looking at banning them. All these type of things. Netanyahu kind of played his genocide card as long and hard as he could, and I feel that he decided now's a good time to pause. And I think that, unfortunately, that's all it is a pause, because I don't think there can be any lasting peace while Netanyahu's still around. And I think that's what it is. So, and it's also a case of, they want to praise him, because if you don't praise him, he will, he could just as likely turn around and say, oh, well, Netanyahu, let the bombing commence again just because he's pissed off. You got to treat Trump like a baby.
He's a child, yes. Yep.
And that's what it is. Unfortunately, he's got the attention span of a baby. So how long is he going to care about this issue? Or is he going to say, oh, I solved it. If it falls over now, it's not my fault. And he'll find someone else to blame. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in, where the president of the United States is a toddler, and that's
infant. Yes, absolutely. I do want to pick up on when we speak about the fact that Australia just recognised a Palestinian state, how that sits with a situation where we're then congratulating, or celebrating a deal that is about the US and the UK, Trump leading this so-called peace plan for Gaza rather than involving Palestinians in any kind of legitimate or genuine self-determination process. I think I see a real conflict there that doesn't quite sit right to me if you're recognizing a Palestinian state, but at the same time saying, oh, but you don't get to decide what happens in your future.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole problem with the entire deal, is it was between two parties, neither of which was Palestine. And okay, that's fine because it was able to get Israel to stop. That's fine for a ceasefire, because who was doing all the killing? Who was committing the genocide? It was Israel. You didn't need to involve the Palestinians really to stop Israel bombing hospitals and murdering journalists. You just needed to convince Israel to stop doing that. But in terms of an actual ongoing peace, where's the Palestinian voices here? Where, because this is the key thing. If Palestinians still feel like, and as they rightfully should right now, that Israel essentially has them as a colonial state where they do not have equal rights, do not have rights of their own self-determination, and are essentially, denied a massive human rights, denied the, even the right to have a house, a roof over your head without threatening it with getting bombed.
Yeah.
That's not going to take away any of the, the tension. And,
the underlying
whether or not you think Hamas to blame or not, Hamas aren't going to walk away while there is no pressure on them, because there's no legitimacy given to any voice in Palestine, because Tony Blair and Donald Trump and Netanyahu just want the three of them to be able to discuss it with a couple figureheads from Palestine or from somewhere else. And also, nothing's going to happen until we've got Jordan, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, not Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, even possibly Iran, until you've actually got a combined set of nations who are buying into this. Then it's just a ceasefire. Great, because people were getting killed and we want that to stop. But right now, Palestinians will be, I would suspect, relieved that the killing has stopped, at least to the extent it was. But that relief is very quickly going to give way to, okay, what now? I've got no home. We've got no hospitals. We've got no infrastructure.
Yep.
Who's paying for the rebuild? We didn't bomb it. Is Israel going to pay for it? And, is anything going to change? And, there is nothing in that big peace plan that had any real voice for Palestinians. And, it was colonial days all over again. It really, it is. And as we know from history, colonialism does not end well.
And I think I also just want to kind of make the argument that, yes, the bombings may have stopped for now. There is some reprieve and a huge relief to see captives released. But as you point out, Israel is still killing Palestinians. And also there's potentially an argument that the genocide has not stopped while Israel continues to restrict the entry of aid into Gaza. And that's meant to be a major part of this deal, of this ceasefire, is them opening the Rafah crossing with Egypt to allow aid in, but they've continued to restrict the number of trucks that can come through and continued to delay that border crossing opening, at least the last that I checked as we record this. And Palestinians are continuing to starve, and that is one of the tools that Israel has used in its genocide. So until that happens as well, then I don't think that we can meaningfully say that we've stopped the genocide either.
No, absolutely. And they're still, as far as I am aware, not letting journalists in. It's stopping the bombing is great, but as you say, stopping bombing doesn't prevent starvation. It doesn't prevent infant mortality because there's no hospitals to be able to deliver or treat people who are sick from non sort of warlike wounds, who have just got health issues that have come from the complete collapse of the society and the civilization due to the mass bombing. I mean, so a long way to go. And Israel, as you say, do not exactly seem to be in any hurry. They're doing the minimum that they can get away with, because it's not like Netanyahu suddenly woke up and thinks that the Gazans are people who deserve to live with dignity and are equal to Israelis. His hatred of them continues. It's just that he found it, the political cost of continuing the bombing was obviously too great given what Trump was telling him. It's such a shitty situation because, the stopping of the bombing almost just gives us the ability to see truly the destruction that now remains. And, how do you repair all of this is just, it's going to take masses of investment. Trump would, I think, want the private sector or America to at least make profit out of that. But who's paying for this?
It's been estimated something like $70 billion, right, to rebuild. Yeah.
And, it was fine with Iraq when they did that because they were able to get all the big companies going in and essentially making profits out of it because there was also oil to be had. But really with Gaza, there's just, there's just humanitarianism to be had. And that generally hasn't been a very profitable thing that is going to see all these American construction companies wanting to front up out of the goodness of their heart. So there's going to have to be a massive international combined effort. But again, how do we organise this when you've also got Donald Trump, who is completely undermined and attempting to destroy the UN? So it's not going to be the UN because Netanyahu won't let the UN in. It's,
yes.
It just feels like whenever it gets to Trump, you always think at the end, he just thinks there's a bit of personal glory and then there's some profit to be had, or at least some bribery to be had. And the more you think about it, the more you look into it, the less confident you feel that this is going to end up anywhere good for the Gazans.
Yes, which is why it's so galling to have Australian politicians, including Labor politicians, out there celebrating, which when it really just seems as though I think they would love to be able to just stop talking about Gaza. They want to be talking about other things, and I suppose I'll use that as a segue to talk about other things.
We're in the money. We're in the money. No government charges. Oi! That Mutual Community Building Society mob, they've got this new money saver account, and it's free of government charges. We'll go broke. Truth. There's no bank charges either. What about the interest rates? Really high. The voters will hate that. Mate, they're not charging high interest rates. They're paying high interest rates on money at call.
The new Mutual Community Money Saver account. High interest calculated daily, money at call, no bank charges, no government charges.
Oh, no government charges?
The Money Saver account. New from Mutual Community Building Society.
The things that they are wanting to talk about this week, because the Labor's superannuation changes are finally back, but they've had a makeover. They've been to the Business Council School of Beauty and had a makeover. I don't know, made that one up on the spot, not sure if that works. But we had Treasurer Jim Chalmers, of course, come out on Monday and announced to the press that Cabinet had signed off on six key changes to their proposed super tax changes. And I think, yes, we'll get into the details in a minute, but the top line summary is basically that they've backed down on a few of the key elements under pressure from investors, from business groups and their allies, and will now be collecting less tax from the wealthy than initially proposed. If any listeners didn't hear our episode, I think it was number 178 in June, we did a bit more of a detailed discussion of the original proposal, but maybe we can get the very educated summary from someone who's probably better at explaining it than we are anyway. What's the top line of what that original proposal was, Greg?
The original proposal was all about trying to limit the massive, and we're talking, many, many billions of dollars in tax breaks each year that are going to the very wealthy in superannuation, because superannuation was set up to provide people with a reasonable retirement, basically. That was kind of the phraseology used. And then along came a bloke, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, John Howard, who kind of, to put it bluntly, he fucked us all over. When superannuation was introduced, one of the things that was realised was if we're forcing people through compulsory superannuation to essentially put part of their income into an account that they can't touch until they retire, it's probably not fair that money is taxed at the same rate as income tax, which you can spend everything straight away. Yeah. And so they brought in these tax concessions. So instead of being taxed at your income tax rate, it was only taxed at 15%, which is great. If you're on the top income tax bracket of 45%, you're getting a really sweet deal. But to counter that, there was this reasonable benefit limit, which essentially was arguing that once you've got a certain amount of super, you don't need any more encouragement or help to save. You've got enough.
Yes, you'll be fine in retirement, since that's what it's meant to be for.
Not in the government's interest to be basically spending taxpayer money on a very wealthy person saving for their own retirement. There's no benefit for us. They were never going to be on the age pension, so they're not saving money. So there was this basically this limit, and John Howard came along and said, "How about we get rid of that?" Because we don't want to prevent people from being discouraged. We don't want people to be discouraged.
I don't want to crush people's aspiration.
Yeah, it was all about the aspiration. So he got rid of that, and then suddenly we were having people putting everything they could into super because it suddenly became an incredibly good tax dodge. And it's costing a lot of money. And I'm talking for the top 10% of Australians, they're getting a bit over 20 billion a year in tax breaks through super. So the richest 10%, we're giving them 20 billion a year to save for their retirement, essentially. And yeah, that's a lot of money, and it's always a bit hard to understand these things, but a good sort of reckoner of how much money we're talking about, the Parliamentary Budget Office has estimated that to put dental in Medicare would cost about 14 billion. So we're giving 6 billion more to the richest 10% so that they can save for a comfortable retirement than we could be giving free dental to everybody. So that's the amount of money we're doing. And what Jim Chalmers attempted to do was go, okay, well, this is untenable. Because we're actually going to be getting to a point where the cost of the richest 10, 20% is actually going to be a bigger cost to the budget than the age pension. So we've got to do something about this. And he decided, right, we're going to bring in a threshold of once you've got more than 3 million in your super, which was about 80,000 people or 0.5% of everybody with a superannuation balance. So not even the top 1%, the top 0.5%. Instead of only paying 15% on their super earnings, they were going to have to pay 30%. So still a tax break if you're a rich person, which you would be if you got 3 million in super. You're still not paying that 45%, but you're going to pay 30%.
And
it was only going to apply
on the proportion over
and it was
3
only going to
million
apply to the proportion that is associated to above 3 million. So if you went from 3 million to 3.2 million in a year, you would only be paying on the 0.2 million bit.
It's hard to explain because you have to divide. There's like multiple steps of dividing it until you finally get to the tax.
I got out the spreadsheet and actually came up with a nice little spreadsheet that I could plug in any number and it would spit it out. But it took a while there was a few formulas going on there. So it was a case of unless you had massive amounts of super, and we're talking well over 10 million, it really wasn't going to be a big issue. The other thing, though, was it was going to tax what are called unrealized capital gains, which is essentially a capital gain is just a profit. Think of it as a profit. So let's say you got shares in BHP or something like that, and it goes up in value. You haven't sold them, but you have made an unrealized capital gain because it's just paper money. You haven't actually sold it yet. When you sell those shares for a profit, then you have realized that capital gain, and that's when you pay tax on it. But what Chalmers realized is that superannuation funds, a lot of people don't actually sell their assets until they retire because they do that so they can avoid paying tax on them. Once you retire, the whole tax, there can be instances where you're paying no tax because you're now officially retired. And so he was like, what's happening is these balances are growing and growing, but they're not selling any of their assets. They're just increasing the size of their superannuation fund, which is then getting more money because the actual size of their fund is growing.
Yeah.
And he's like, we could tax that. And it actually is quite easy to do. It's something that a good way to think about it is because there's been a lot of journalists going, oh, you can't do this. It's impossible.
How could you possibly? Yes. Yeah.
But think of it this way. If you're on the age pension and you own shares, you actually have to tell the Centrelink and the tax office what shares you own, what property you have, And every 6 months, they are updating the value of those holdings, because if it goes above a certain limit, you start getting less pension because you're of the assets test.
Yeah.
They're not waiting for you to sell your shares, or they're not saying, oh, you had a property and that property has gone up in value, but you haven't sold it, so don't worry. They go, no, your assets have increased in value, so you're getting less of the pension. So unrealized capital gains are treated all the time for people who have an assets test, who are on the pension, who are retired,
Funny
who
how
are
it
right
works
at the
that
low
way,
end of scales.
isn't it?
But
Yeah.
for these people with over 3 million, they say, oh, no, you can't do that. That's impossible. What communism?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
what Chalmers has done is he's kept the 3 million, and he's got rid of the unrealized capital gains, and it's now going to be only taxed on the realized capital gains. The other thing was Jim Chalmers originally was just going to keep it at 3 million.
Yeah.
It wasn't indexed, wouldn't go up in line with inflation. We had all these articles saying, oh, there are 20-year-olds now who, when they'll retire, they'll have more than 3 million. To be honest,
What
bullshit.
20-year-olds? Yep.
Yeah, to be honest, bullshit.
Okay.
I did the figures, and look, even using the figures that, the business groups and the wealthy people who are writing criticism of this in the Fin Review were saying, even using their figures, you're kind of looking at best maybe in 30 or 40 years, about 10% of people with super having over 3 million. And I'm like, yeah, the richest 10% probably should get taxed more for their super.
Yeah.
And it was this crazy situation where we had all these people worrying about what the situation for their retirement or their kids' retirement will be in 30 or 40 years. Right at the same time, the government was also weighing out what is its emissions target going to be for 2035, and whether or not it should keep going for 2050. And everyone's like, oh, well, look, that's
so far
way
in the
off.
distance. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So suddenly, apparently someone's superannuation is really important. How much they're going to be taxed in 35 years or something is important, but what state of the climate is not important. It was this incredible disconnect.
Yeah.
So, Jim Chalmers did kind of back down on those things. One good thing, he did bring in a new threshold at 10 million. So if you got more than 10 million of your super, so that's about 8,000 people.
Yes.
So I think that's about 0.05%. I think it's basically 10% of 0.5%, whatever that is. I can't do it right now. I think it's 0.05%.
That would make sense.
They will be taxed, their earnings that are associated with that will be taxed at 40%. Now, that's a good thing, because Chalmers couldn't bring back the full benefit limit thing that John Howard got rid of. You kind of can't put the toothpaste back in the tube after that. It would be, because you'd be like, well, do we grandfather it? It's not like you can say to these people who've got their super, oh, sorry, you have to give it. It was really hard to do it. So what he's done is put in a tax of 40%, which is so close to the top tax rate of 45% that it kind of takes away the advantage of dumping all your money in super when you got that much. Yeah, it's still a concession. But at least for that amount over 10 million, it's really not much of a concession. And so it's good there. But the problem is it still only applies to realized capital gains. So you're still going to have people knowing how to get around that by selling their assets when it most suits them financially. And I don't mean in terms of profit, but actually to minimize tax. And also every accountant and every financial advisor now saying, they'll just put them all in a trust now and they'll use that to avoid paying tax. And it's like, so it's a real whack-a-mole to all these incredibly wealthy people being able to use the tax system to avoid paying tax. And as I say, it's not a costless thing to the public. If we didn't give these tax breaks to the richest 10% for their super, $20 billion a year, that's a lot of money.
It's so much money.
The society essentially decide, yeah, it's okay. Let's give those people a lot of money and we'll say, oh, we can't do dental and Medicare because where's the money coming
Where's
from?
the cash? No, exactly. How are you going to pay for it? The classic question that the Greens are, who have proposed dental into Medicare by taxing the rich, like literally this, are called crazy. I mean, one thing that's interesting, I've seen, and this has been reported widely, and it's in the government's media release about the fact that in the first year of its operation, this new proposal will only raise, like the old one would have raised 2.5 billion, this one will raise 2 billion. And so they're like, well, it's not that much of an impact on the budget to make this compromise and get rid of unrealized gains and add the indexation. But the indexation part of it is what matters there, right? Because over time, that loss is going to grow exponentially.
Yep. And the lack of indexation was going to progressively make it fairer because it was, it's 0.5% of people now, but hopefully in 30, 40 years' time, it would have been 10%. And also the amount of money it would have raised is certainly going to be reduced each year. But look, when it was announced, I was fairly disgusted, or at least sort of frustrated. One of the good things, though, about it is at least we can say it's better than it was, which, okay, is not saying much, but it's been a debate that has brought attention to something that I don't think many people really knew about or understood. It is
That's true. I've learned a lot.
It's really highlighted, and we certainly at the Australian Institute have really been highlighting just how much it costs. One other thing we should just quickly say that was introduced that wasn't in the original one, a thing called the low income superannuation tax offset, which is a big mouthful. What that essentially is, they've raised it from 500 to 800. I think it's 510 to 810 or something like that. And also raised the threshold from 37,000 to 45,000. Now, why that was in place is, as I was saying, superannuation is taxed at 15%. But for people on low incomes, their income tax rate is actually lower than 15%. They don't pay 15% on their income. So it was actually a penalty for them to have their money in super. And so that's why there was this offset in place. And as we know, one of the good things the government did do in the budget before the election has put in changes to the bottom tax rate, which has gone from 19 to 16, then to 15 and 14%. So by the time it got to 14%, there'd be a real penalty for low-income people to have their money in super. So that's kind of at least cancelling that out. It's really good for women because women are the ones who are, more likely to have low incomes and also the ones who are most affected by having small superannuation balances. So that's, one good thing. So and also, as I say, the 40% tax on over 10 million, it's absurd that it's 10 million, but it's kind of a starting point at least. But the problem is, and this is what I was saying back after the election when this became an issue, we're talking 80,000 people here. I did so many damn interviews with ABC and others where they'd talk and say, well, what should our listeners be thinking about? I'd say, well, do all your listeners have more than 3 million in their super? And that's how I don't think so. I said, well, then they can go to sleep at night and nothing's changing.
Don't worry.
I want a pretty good wicket. I haven't been working full-time most of my life. I did a lot of part-time work and casual work. My wife, she's been a teacher since she was 21. Neither of us are anywhere even close to 3 million. And we are not poor. We're in our incomes are good. Compared to a vast majority of people. And we know we're not even going to get close to, I don't think we'll get close to 1 million, even if inflation goes off over the next 20 years before I retire. I'm not going to get there. So to get the 3 million, we are talking the wealthiest of the wealthy. And yet the government weren't able to, and I say the government, Anthony Albanese was not able to show enough bottle and actually say, no, we're doing this because it needs to be done. It was very clear from all the reporting that it wasn't Jim Chalmers who's kind of backed down. It was Anthony Albanese who told him, we're not going to do what you want to do, so change it, mate.
Yeah.
And that does not bode well, because this was the smallest thing they could do.
Yeah.
And we've got so many other big issues like capital gains tax that needs to be addressed, and negative gearing with that. Gas are basically getting away, not paying tax. Santos, we've just reported, went now 10 years without paying any company tax. No LNG export projects have paid any petroleum resources rent tax. All of these things that are big issues that are going to be big fights. And it's like, geez, you weren't up for this little
Couldn't
fight.
even do this one. I thought it was the most ironic thing in the government's media release about these changes, this new proposal for super. They said, quote, there are 14 times as many people who will benefit from the boost to LISTO, the lower income tax offset, as there are people with over $3 million in super. And it's like, yes, exactly. Like, it couldn't have been this fucking hard when you lay it out like that. And it makes you think as well, because it's like, I think it's hard to wrap your head around sometimes what exactly has happened here in terms of political power and influence, whether it is that a small group of wealthy people in Australia have such inordinate power that the people who have those big super balances can exert that power on politicians. I think that's part of it. But the more insidious part of it, as you point out when you're talking to the ABC, is the way that, enabled by mainstream media, those powers are able to convince the rest of the country that it also affects them and they need to fight, because those are the ones who are then able to convince the government to back down. It's that critical mass. And yeah, it is so frustrating, because but if someone, like, if journalists were just willing to not buy into that bullshit and to be clearer that this does not affect you, like to actually report that more critically, perhaps we could have reforms like this. Perhaps we could have dental into Medicare,
Yeah, look, and it's certainly what we at the Oz Institute very much try and do with my Guardian. I mean, as you know, I wrote a fair bit about this.
Yes, yes.
But I think you've got it right. And this is one reason I think why Chalmers probably didn't go to the mattresses over this, because in the end he knew most people don't understand superannuation. Most people don't know how much super they've got, to be honest. And you probably would have people in their 20s thinking, oh, maybe I will have 3 million by the time. Look, I checked on my super and everything. I still can't remember exactly how much I got. It's sort of it's
I know.
And no one understands how it's taxed, which is why it's so lucrative, because that ignorance has meant that accountants have been able to get away with so much, and no one thinks it's all that egregious. Whereas perhaps on an issue like capital gains tax and negative gearing, people know if they can't afford a house. People know if their kids can't afford a house. And that's where I think the government, if they actually are up for that fight, and I have hope that they are. I know the unions, the ACTU, are still very much pushing for changes to capital gains tax, as well as other things like taxes to gas and things like that. So there's pressure from within kind of the party itself. And in some ways, that's an easier argument to make to people that, hey, housing is fucked. Your kids can't afford to live in the suburb that they grew up in. That's wrong.
Yeah.
They can't even afford to live within an hour's drive of where they grew up in. If they grew up in Sydney, something needs to be done. People know that negative gearing has got something to do with it. They don't know that capital gains tax discount is the main culprit, which is great, because then people might think, oh, yeah, I don't care if you do something about that. Just don't touch negative gearing. And it'll be like, okay, we won't touch negative gearing. We'll do the thing that matters.
Yeah.
But at least there's something that the government can attack and, really sort of sell as well. Whereas with this, I think it was always like, oh, we're not doing it for you. This is only going to hurt a small number of people. And everyone's like, but I might one day be one of those small number of people,
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah, there's that.
no
Yeah.
one in their 30s who can't afford a house is thinking, oh yeah, but I might one day be a person who's going to have a house and an investment property as well.
You don't think people are still, that's part of the problem? They're like, "But I
I
wanna be
think it's
invested."
there, but
Yeah.
we've got such a critical mass now of people who don't own their own home.
Yeah.
When we've now got, for the first time ever, a majority of people in their early 30s not owning a home, that means there is a lot of people who are at least one house away from being able to get an investment property. Whereas before,
Yes.
even when it was expensive, you still had at least a majority of people who had a house and thought, oh, maybe one day I can make that
Could be
next
me.
step.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
but you are right. There has been so much over the last 25 years that has skewed the quote unquote Australian dream of owning your own home to being owning your own investment property, to the point where last year I was doing an interview with ABC Melbourne about their changes to Airbnb, basically taxation and things and regulation about being able to have Airbnb properties. And it was with someone from a tourism council or something. And she was saying, oh, isn't it the great Australian dream to have your own holiday home? I'm like,
what?
No, the greatest dream is to have a home.
Yeah. Fuck.
So you're right. There is a lot of undoing, and there is always that sense of, bloody the boomers and the Gen Xers, they got it. Now you're taking away from us. But I do also think that housing affordability has got so damaged, and it is so bad that for people in their early 20s, even in their 30s, are thinking, I think I'm going to be renting always, and the hope of getting there is gone. And more crucially, even people who own homes who have got kids, and I'm someone own home, got a kid, knowing, well, the only way she's going to ever be able to afford a property is basically we either buy it using our equity, or she's bank of mum and dad. And, the bank of mum and dad's always been, we got our first, my wife and I, bank of mum and dad. It's not a new thing, but now it's impossible almost without it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's this sense of, it's got so bad that the government can now at least, I think, attack it. It's still going to be a huge fight, but I think there is at least a winning argument, whereas perhaps with superannuation, the argument that, this is just a small thing, there's also this case, well, if it's just a small thing, why are so many people angry about it and everything? Whereas at least for tackling capital gains or negative gearing, they can kind of say, this isn't a small thing. This is a big thing.
Yes.
This is a great reform. This is a key thing. They can sort of lean into it rather than with super, they're always, it's not a big thing. Don't worry. Don't panic.
Yes.
It's like, why are you telling me not to panic? Maybe I should be,
Yeah. Yeah. And capital gains tax is like the other side of the coin when everyone's freaking out about taxing, quote unquote, taxing unrealized gains. They're like, but it's double tax because you're taxed on capital gains when you sell. When the fact is, actually, most of the time you're not paying full tax on that. You're getting discounts anyway. So
you're getting it half tax free.
Yeah.
We actually had a friend in the office a couple of years ago, and she was saying how a friend of hers had a property, or their parents had a property and were selling it. And she was going, and it's so bad, you got to pay 50% capital gains tax. And she was like, no, it's not 50%. It's a 50% tax discount.
Yes.
That can't be right. It's like, yes, it is.
Yes,
You
it
get
is.
half.
Yes, it is.
You
Yeah,
get
this
half
people
the tax
don't
rate. It was
know
more realistic for her to think it was a 50%
that you were paying
tax than it was
50%
half tax
on the
free. So
gains. Let's do
yeah,
that.
I mean,
That's the next phase of socialism. We take 50% of the earnings. No, I'll settle for just you paying the actual, a regular tax rate on capital gains. I mean, we got into the unrealized gains tax thing, but I feel I should ask you. Like, what is your take on this? Is there any argument, or if not, how do you respond to the argument that it's unfair to, if someone doesn't have the liquidity, as they say, and all their money, all their super balance is tied up, they've got a self-managed super fund, it's all tied up in a family farm that they can't sell. Is it unfair to tax the increase in the value of that farm?
It's not only fair, we should be doing it. It's unfair not to be. And for a start, the liquidity argument is bullshit. They all have enough money. But even if they don't, why is your farm in your superannuation fund? That's not what superannuation is for. And if it is in there, there's only one reason it's in there, and that's to avoid paying tax. So sorry, you have to pay tax. And, I always when we talk about unrealized capital gains, I always say, okay, did you see the most recent 200 richest list in the Fin Review, where they've got how much Gina Rinehart's earned and who's...
That's not her cash.
That's unrealized gains. That is, if she sold everything right now. They're not saying she has sold it and it's sitting in a big money bin like Scrooge McDuck. It's all unrealized gains. And they will talk about, the wealthiest in Australia, the richest wealthy. Their wealth is increased by 1.3 billion combined. It's like, unrealized capital. And you think they're ignoring that? No, they're using that because it's equity that they're borrowing against to raise,
increase their wealth.
And this was people who have a house, whether it's me, whether it's grandparents, whoever bought their house back when the houses were actually affordable. The value of that property has gone up. You haven't sold it, but you're able to borrow against it and actually generate more wealth from that. And everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm not poor. I've got this wealth. I can and the bank will go, yeah, great. We'll borrow against that so you can invest somewhere else and make more money and get more income. And then when it comes to those saying, hey, I think we should be taxing that, you go, oh, but it's not real.
No, it's fake. It's not real. Yeah. What equity? What wealth? Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, but what if the property goes down in value? It's like, well, then you actually are able to deduct that against future taxable earnings on your super. So it cancelled out. And it's this case of what it was all about was trying to hide the fact that the people who had their businesses and their farms in their super who were worried about this, the reason they were doing it was to avoid paying tax. And I have no sympathy for those people. You've been abusing a system that was not designed to avoid paying tax. It was designed to encourage people to save so they wouldn't be reliant on the age pension. You're not one of those people. You didn't used to be able to do it until John Howard came along and opened the gates for you. Sorry, my sympathy is completely non-existent for you,
Yeah, as you, I mean... Yeah, I loved how you put it when you did your column on this back in June, which was, quote, we don't give tax breaks on superannuation so that you can fund the inheritance of your children. Tattoo that on your eyeballs. 100% agree. So the politics of it all, I mean, that's some of the detail. But now we have a situation where, I mean... But when Chalmers came out and announced this, he said, I've had a constructive conversation or something like that with the Greens leader, Larissa Waters, but they very shortly afterwards came out and slammed it pretty strongly, said it's a gift to the super rich, it'll cost the budget billions, it's a capitulation to the wealthiest people in the country. I will say just briefly, I mean, I saw there was some of the reporting was saying, the Greens seem to be criticising the indexation element despite previously advocating for it. Probably worth noting that the Greens' proposal was bring the threshold down to, 2 million maximum, something slightly more reasonable, and then index it. But if you're going to set it so high initially, it doesn't make sense to index it. So the coalition, though, I'm a little less clear on their they have come out and been like, this is a win. Look at us go. We did it. Everyday Australians. Wow, so good. Does that mean, are they supporting it or are they still holding their...
Yeah, I have no idea. I doubt they would. Why would they there is no reason for them to support it. It's not like it's not like the environmental laws where they're going to support something because the government is basically negotiating with Matt Canavan to get things passed rather than with the Greens, who they could negotiate with. Always remember, the Labor do not need any vote of any Liberal senator, national senator, One Nation senator, any senator.
Choice. Yep.
They could just go to the Greens and say, okay, we'll lower the threshold to 2 million and we'll index it, but we're keeping everything else. And they would have said, fine. Or if that said, look, even if you'd sort of, there was no negotiation, there was no give or take or anything, it was all take. They didn't even really have to negotiate with the Liberal Party on this. They capitulated all by themselves.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the Liberal Party will pass it. They might. And if they do pass it, that's a real giveaway that it's a complete crock.
Yeah.
But there might be estimates that's going to raise a certain amount of tax, but everyone knows that there's easy ways to get around it.
God, yeah.
And if they want, they could, they might pass it just so they can say, look at us, we're being a serious government that cares about the budget or something, but they mightn't even do that, so I really don't know. I think, and this is one of the problems we've seen with Labor parties for a very long time now, where they will do something thinking, oh, well, if we do this, the Liberal Party won't criticise because this is what the Liberal Party told us we should do. And as soon as they do it, the Liberal Party is saying, great, okay, but we're not passing it.
Yeah. Now's the next step in our demands. Now you need to go further
it's
to the
real
right.
Lucy in the football kind of thing. So
yes, yeah. If the Greens are in the balance of power, what do you think that they should push for? Or do they kind of, if they block it in any way, do they run the risk of just obstructing what, as we said, is an improvement on the status quo?
Look, I think on this, it's probably there's nothing to be gained with not voting for it, because we're in a situation now where the super is taxed the way John Howard wants it to be taxed, and that's not a good thing. Even though this is a nothing change really, the low income tax offset, superannuation tax offset is not nothing for people, so that's a good thing. You take it and you say, because it's not like it's going to make anything worse.
Sure.
That's the thing. It's not a situation like with some Environmental Protection Act where if we approve this, it's actually, if everyone's going, oh, something's better than nothing. It's like, no, this something will be worse than nothing. It will actually make things worse.
Yeah.
That's not a situation here, because unrealized capital gains aren't taxed at the moment. So there's no change there. At least there's a 3 million and a 10 million thresholds that are going to tax a bit more. Lots more still to be done, but I don't think there's much political win in doing it. And also, even sort of economically, it's like, this is the most this week government's going to do. We will move amendments. They're going to vote against them. But as I say, this is at least not making things worse, making a very minor bit better, hopefully.
Yeah.
But the good thing is we've at least now got in the principle that people with 3 million in super and more should actually get less tax breaks than everyone else. Now, that is a terribly, obscenely high start.
Why was that so hard?
But at least that is now part of the firmament, and it will be part of the law. And so then hopefully that at least was the first pushing against the door, and hopefully, we might have a Prime Minister who's got a bit more gumption one day in the future. But it's at least the principle is there, even if the reality doesn't match what needs to, given just how unfair the whole system is. So I think the Greens should vote for it, but certainly not praise it while they're doing so. But just because it's not great doesn't mean, as I say, it's a whole different kettle of fish when we get to the environmental changes that Murray Watt seems to be negotiating, as I say, with Matt Canavan and others. That's a completely different thing, because that actually can end up damaging things in this case. Improvement is small, but it's an improvement.
Yeah, and given what we know, I mean, it does seem quite possible, even likely, that if the Greens tried to block or push for anything, Labor would be more than happy to strike a deal with the LNP that with the coalition that would be even worse than what they've put forth now.
Yeah, or the Libs block it as well, and we get nothing, and we've still got this terrible situation. So, yeah, it's and also it's probably in the Greens' interest to say, hey, ALP, we passed your shitty changes to superannuation. You didn't have to rely on the Libs votes or things, stop, not that the Liberal Labor Party will ever stop criticising the Greens. But,
I mean, yes, that's as foolish to think they would as it is for Labor to think that they can stop the Liberals from criticising them, because...
Yeah, exactly. So,
good job.
But, I just think there's nothing to be gained from blocking this. What are you really going to say? Actually, we don't think people with more than $3 million in their super shouldn't pay a higher rate of tax, because that's essentially what it'll be painted as, and that's not a good place to be politically. And as I say, economically, even it's not what we want. It's not ideal, but at least it's not worse. And you take the win, no matter how small, and keep fighting.
I think you're probably right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Greg. It was an absolute pleasure to have you, to have the grog not in the flesh. We're recording this online, but on the show. So thank you.
No worries, Emerald. It was really good to have a chat, and hopefully listeners enjoyed it.
And where's the best place to find your work? Anything to plug?
Best place to find my work? Well, there's the Guardian site that every Thursday has my column, but also the Australia Institute site, australiainstitute.org.au, has all our research, which is not just mine, but all the other extremely talented people who certainly are pushing for progressive policy on all manner of things, whether it be getting rid of AUKUS, actually having decent environmental protections, and having more transparency and a better NAC, better FOI rules. And also, if you do like podcasts, my podcast, Dollars and Cents, is out generally every Thursday as well. So you can find that in all your podcast platforms. Just search for Dollars and Cents, and you can basically find out what's been happening that week in economics and a little bit of politics as well.
Well, thank you again. And if you want to support the show, if you're listening, if you leave us a 5-star review, that really helps. And you can find all of our links and clips from the show that you can share at Serious Danger AU on the social media platforms. And you'll also find a link there to scoop up the last remaining tickets for that live show. Well, I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
No worries. Thank you.
Serious Danger Australia.